So on our square body and C10 wide ride IFSs, the cross members bolt in, and they bolt in from underneath. So I have a cross member sitting here to show you guys. The cross members have a big mount flange here. This goes on the outside of the frame and the bottom. And the motor mount is a separate component. So you can take this out, and then it fits on top of the frame and on the bottom of the frame to sandwich the bottom, and bolts in. So this configuration of a Gen 4 wide ride for the C10s and square bodies is much easier to install. And to kind of test our theory, we wanted to do, and we know you can do it on a bare frame, that's easy enough. But can you do it with the fenders on, the inner fenders on, the motor and transmission in? So we put this cross member in up from the bottom. We never unbolted the trans mount. We never took any of the radiator coolant lines loose. The only thing we really did to prep was to pull the headers, and we had a transmission jack under the balancer here, just so we could hold it up while we were putting the cross member in. And as we held it up, we just kind of lifted up the motor a little more. We worked the motor mounts into place. We sat it right back down. Now this motor is about a 1/4 inch higher than it was on the factory mounts, but that's the only change. So no drive shaft change, none of that stuff. When we tell you there's some trimming involved, you see the cut we made here. On a coilover, it won't go far enough to clear up there, but on a bag and shock assembly, it will travel up about this high when it's fully laid out. So you do need a fair cut on your inner fenders, but this can totally be installed with the sheet metal on and with the motor and transit. Good deal. Okay, so we got our project truck off the lift, put together outside, and we've been driving around for a week or so. And so we wanted to give you kind of a wrap up on the install of the wide ride. So you saw that we were able to install this without pulling the motor, without pulling the front sheet metal. I think our total hour count on the whole job was under 40 man hours. That included reworking the exhaust, and we did a little work on the power steering, put a cooler in and whatnot, and getting the steering connected. So it really went pretty easy. So truck is sitting here right now on the suspension, on the springs. It's a standard height spindle. We did not put a drop spindle on it. So this is with the stock height spindle. It's got a 275 35/18 tire on it. It's about 26 inches tall, stock height spindle. And right here at the rocker, we're just about 6 inches from the bottom of the rocker to the ground. So this is right above what we would consider the headache range. You can drive this all over town, doesn't scrub or bump or do anything goofy. We could put a drop spindle on here and get another 2 inches out of this without sacrificing any of the suspension travel or the ride quality at all. That would put the rocker about 4 inches off the ground. And of course, if you did a bag and shock setup with a drop spindle, you could slam it on the ground and run the rails on the ground. So if you look at it on the front side, one of the great things about this, of course, we didn't tell you before, we weighed all the pieces. It's 165 pounds or 180 pounds, right around there, lighter with our suspension than the stock suspension. So if you're a drag racer, performance enthusiast, whatever, you just cut 180 pounds off, That's almost two-tenths of a second. And the nice thing is, if you look from underneath, you know, at this height, the stock cross member would be almost on the ground. And here, we have a lot of ground clearance between the bottom of our cross member and the ground. One of the exhaust pipes that we reworked is hanging a little lower than we'd like. We tried to use some of the existing stuff, and the driver's side of the factory trans cross member is a little low. Could have got a custom cross member, but we're trying to do this one little piece at a time so we can totally see the differences. Anyway, so we're gonna head around. I'm gonna show you inside. One of the things we wanted to try to do was we wanted to try to use the stock steering column without modifying it. Now these are a little on the long side and it makes the geometry a little tight. But if you notice, this is the factory column in the factory mount, stock dash, keys are in it, wipers work, everything works. We didn't even ever take this out. We never took it out, we never remounted it or anything. I'm gonna show you under the hood to see what that's like. So we did this with 3 U-joints. This is actually a U-joint that was on the vehicle before, so we reused it. Stock column mounted in its original location. We built in a little slip shaft here, so it's got some give if you're ever in an accident or front-ended or something like that. It also helps free up the steering a little bit. This is our third or idler U-joint, and we have a support bearing down here, and you notice I had to notch the frame just a tiny bit right here, okay? And then there's a third U-joint right onto the rack and pinion. And I'll tell you, it is tight. We're right at the max of the angles on the U-joints, but it rotates freely and everything works very smooth. It steers great, and you know, there's no bind. So you can also kind of look in and see, you look around the upper A-arm here, you know, we trimmed maybe a little more than we needed to, but we didn't want this to hit on the way up. And you get to see all the suspension, which is cool. It's been aligned. It's real easy to align these. You just rotate the cam for caster, or excuse me, you rotate the cam for camber, and then you just slide the cam and the arm and everything forward and back for caster. So right now we're about -3/4 of a degree camber and about 4.5 degrees positive caster. And we put a little tiny toe out in it to make it steer nice and quick. And she's ready to go. Good. So Brandon and I talked, and we were thinking about doing a part of this video where I was driving down a street, or him in a car next to me filming it and everything, but it wouldn't make any difference because the driving aspect of this thing is it's super smooth, it's super responsive, it handles fantastic, and you one finger it down the street. So all you'd see in a driving video is me sitting over there smiling and laughing at how cool this thing is. And we're just happy it turned out this way. Randall's going to have a great truck to drive. I've been driving it back and forth to work, and it's just fantastic, man. We're super happy with the way it turned out, and I hope it gives you guys an idea that this is approachable and it's doable and it's not that difficult. And whether your truck's complete or you're just starting, this is a good way to go.